now is a good friend of the show, Lorne Gunter. He's a columnist with the Edmonton Sun. I'm reading his article in the Edmonton Journal right now on the by-elections on Tuesday night here in Alberta. I wanted Lorne's take on it because it would appear the status quo held. I don't think there were any surprises last night.
No, I think that's fair. The NDP won the two ridings that they already had, and the UCP held on to the one riding it had. And that is a little unusual, of course, in mid tenure by-elections, because people often vote against the government. But since the two ridings in Edmonton were already held by the opposition, it's easy to vote for the opposition and against the government. I think the surprise would have been if the separatist Republican Party had done better than it did in Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills, which is right in the central part of the province. And I think they probably thought they should have done better than they did. They got 17% of the vote. They helped take 15% away from the UCP compared to the 2023 general election. But they finished third. They finished behind the NDP. So, yeah, I think you're right when you say the status quo held.
Yeah, I mean, I think a victory. I don't think anybody who is really serious about what was happening in Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills thought that the Republicans really stood a chance of taking that riding. No. But I think it would have been considered a real achievement for them if they had bested the NDP.
Yep. And
they didn't do that in a riding that historically has elected a separatist MLA.
It has. So 1982, when it was just called Olds-Didsbury, Gordon Kessler from the Western Canada Concept won that riding right after the National Energy Program was imposed by the federal Liberals. I think that's what's missing this time, is that there wasn't one giant offense by the Liberals. Like, nobody out here expects the Liberals to build a pipeline. Nobody out here expects them to get rid of the net zero power grid or the EV mandate or any of the things that are offensive. But right now, there isn't one thing that people rally around. In 1982, the NEP had just happened. There were all sorts of small oil field service companies that were going under already because drilling had fallen off completely.
Right.
And so there were a lot of people who were angry, and they surprisingly elected Kessler. Now, there was that was early in 1982. There was a general election in November of 82, and Kessler lost. He lost to the PC candidate. At that point, Peter Lougheed came in with all but, I think, 3 seats in the legislature. And so things went back to normal in the general election. But by-elections, as I was saying before, tend to be protest votes. And in this case, first of all, the turnout in Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills was
crazy.
Good.
It was crazy.
Yeah,
it was huge.
It was good. You know, so last night in the 3 by-elections together, there were 33,000 votes cast total in the 3. Almost 16,000 of them, just about half of them, in Olds-Didsbury-Three Hills. So it's not as though the UCP voters in that riding sat home and thought, we got this covered. And that's another reason that Kessler won in 82, is that the PCs thought they had it in the bag. They stayed home. The Western Canada Concept people were driven, and they came out, and they won. In this case, the UCP, I think what benefits the UCP at the moment is that Smith has been very staunch against Ottawa. She's been strong against Carney. She was even stronger against Trudeau. And so she gets an awful lot. She gets a bit of a pass. She is the person to whom a lot of the discontent with the Liberals in Ottawa, that goes to her. She has done a good job of handling that file, and it goes to her. Until she gives people a reason not to, I think the Republican Party, the Separatist Party, is going to have a problem. I think there are a couple of other problems that the Republicans encountered in this by-election on Monday night. One is that their leader had been a UCP member until April 24th.
Right.
So that's only 2 months he's been in the Republican Party. The other is I drove through that riding twice during the by-election, and I kept thinking, why are all these liberal signs up here for? These big red signs with white lettering and everything.
Exactly my thoughts, too.
It was his. There was Cameron Davies, the Republican Party leader. Those were his signs.
Yeah.
It looked like liberal signs. And we have just, of course, finished a federal campaign back in April where those red signs were up there for the liberal candidates. And so I think people were looking at things and saying, what's this Cameron Davies liberal guy running for? And I think the other problem that party has is its name. The Republican Party of Alberta wasn't really an offensive name until Trump got sworn in again in January. But when you look at poll after poll after poll, even conservatives in Canada have soured on Trump and the Republicans to some extent. And so Davies, the leader of the Republican Party of Alberta, the separatist candidate, was running against his own short tenure in the separatist movement. He was running with really bad signs, and he was running with a name that doesn't help him. I mean, it might not hurt them big time, but it doesn't do him any favors either. So I think those were the three things. And, that riding should be prime for separatists. It's rural. It's fairly affluent. There are 3 or 4 major population centers in that riding where there's a lot of ag business or oil business that does really well. And frankly, people who are rural and, let's say, affluent, but certainly comfortable, tend to be the ones who feel the grievances against Ottawa the most. And if he can't get those people to come out in large numbers and vote for him, then they have a problem. 17% is what he ended up with last night.
Right.
That's nothing to sneeze at.
No.
You can't say, you can't say they didn't do well.
Right.
In a very short period of time, they went from, there was an independence candidate ran in that riding in 2023 in the general election, got 5% of the vote. They went from 5% independence to 17% independence. Don't sneeze at that. Don't say, oh, now we don't have to worry about those separatists in Alberta. They couldn't. No, that 17% is still a fair number of people who are angry enough that they were prepared to vote for a separatist party. It's not as good as the Republican Party and the separatists would have wanted, but it is not something that can just be sloughed off.
Yeah, in 60 days. I think what we saw last night, and I think maybe this is, and I'm merely speculating, I think it shows in the voter turnout in that riding, is that the memory of a vote split is still very scary for a lot of Albertans. And I think it was less a referendum on separation in that riding than it was the vehicle to drive the independence movement. Because I think as I've been saying for the last 2 days, the Venn diagram between independence-minded people and UCP voters is a circle. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are scared about the vote splits. They don't want to risk parking their vote in a similarly conservative party. And I think they are looking at it and thinking, well, independence, whatever that looks like, whether it's within Canada or as Americans or a sovereign republic, whatever. Mm-hmm. I think they think that the party system is the wrong vehicle to achieve those means.
I think you've hit on something there too, in that the Republican Party of Alberta is going to have a problem until it has one proposed solution.
Right.
Until it says we're going to be an independent country of our own we hope to have nice relations with Canada and the United States, but we're going to be an independent Republic of Alberta. They haven't said that, but if they could say that, or they could say we want sovereignty association. We all remember with great pain what that meant when Quebec demanded sovereignty association, because nobody knew what it meant.
Right. I don't think they did.
No, I'm pretty sure they did. And then, or we're going to apply to become the 51st state. That's another thing that another rug that got pulled out from under the separatists on this. Is it, I have talked to people in the past seriously about, would we ever leave Confederation? Would we then ask to become the 51st state? What would be the advantages? What would be the disadvantages? But after Trump started taunting everybody with that in December and January and since, I've lost my interest in talking to them about 51st state, because he's just been a disrespectful jackass. So they had that problem too, because they have talked about being the 51st state before. So there's a lot of stuff that worked against separatists that could be, like, I can tell you there are two things that the provincial government is really worried about the federal government doing. One is not approving a pipeline, which I think is a very real possibility. I actually think that's what they're aiming at. They keep saying things like, well, maybe we would do a pipeline, but there are no private sector people pushing it now.
And who would?
They're going to, they're going to do what Trudeau did about LNG, which is to say there's no business case for a new pipeline. We tried. It wasn't us getting in the way. But of course, every impediment that's in the way of a private sector investor coming forward has been put there by the federal Liberals over the last 10 years and is still there. So that's one of the things the provincial government's very worried about. The other one is that we're worried about a new tax on oil and gas, the proceeds from which will be used to support subsidies for manufacturing industries in Ontario and Quebec. And when they talk to you about this privately, they say, we don't know that's what they're getting ready to do. They haven't told us that's what they're getting ready to do. But that makes sense, right? We don't vote for them. Ontario and Quebec vote for them. So why not do what Pierre Trudeau did back in the 80s and steal money from the West and give it to Central Canada? So those are, either one of those would be the trigger for a real separatist movement. What we have now, I think, is 17% of people in a riding that should be favorable to separatists expressing their frustration and anger with Ottawa because the Liberals snatched defeat from the Conservatives' jaws. And, or snatched victory from the Conservatives' jaws. And so I think that's mostly what you got there. You just got some frustration and anger. There is no real separatist movement yet